Hope. In a world riddled with corruption, it can feel like a distant dream. Today, we shine a light on the shadows, exposing the underbelly of power and greed. Join me as we journey through the top 10 most corrupt countries of 2024. Our journey begins in North Africa, a land rich in history and resources, yet plagued by instability and corruption. Since the fall of Gaddafi in 2011, Libya has struggled to establish a stable government. This power vacuum has opened the door to widespread corruption as various factions and militias vie for control of the country's oil wealth. Imagine a nation where armed groups operate with impunity and government institutions are riddled with bribery and extortion. Civil society organizations and courageous individuals are working tirelessly to expose corruption, promote transparency, and demand accountability. The road ahead for Libya is long and uncertain, but by shedding light on the depths of its corruption, we can hope to inspire change. From the sands of Libya, we journey eastward, to the heart of Central Asia. Here, we encounter Turkmenistan, a nation as enigmatic as it is isolated. Ruled by an authoritarian regime with an iron grip on power, Turkestan operates under a veil of secrecy. Independent media is virtually non-existent, dissent is swiftly silenced, and information is tightly controlled by the state. This has created a breeding ground for cronyism and nepotism, where government contracts and economic opportunities are awarded based on personal connections. Despite the challenges, glimmers of hope can be found in the courage of those who dare to speak out against injustice. Our journey takes us now to the Caribbean, to the island nation of Haiti. For decades, Haiti has been trapped in a vicious cycle of corruption, where government officials, often in collusion with criminal networks, siphon off public funds and resources for personal gain. This systemic corruption has crippled Haiti's ability to provide essential services to its citizens, leaving them vulnerable to poverty, disease, and violence. The lack of accountability and transparency has eroded public trust in government institutions, creating a climate of fear and impunity. The situation in Haiti is a stark reminder of the devastating human cost of corruption. Our exploration of corruption takes us now to one of the most secretive and isolated nations on Earth, North Korea. Ruled by the Kim dynasty for over 7 decades, North Korea exists behind a tightly sealed curtain. Information about North Korea is tightly controlled, independent media is non-existent, and any form of dissent is met with swift and brutal repression. The country's highly centralized system creates ample opportunities for bribery, extortion, and embezzlement. This systemic corruption has crippled North Korea's economy, leaving its people impoverished and dependent on the state for survival. We leave the isolation of North Korea and journey south to Nicaragua, a nation grappling with a different kind of authoritarianism. Here the struggle is not just for political freedom, but for the very soul of the nation. Once a beacon of hope for democracy in Central America, Nicaragua was seen as a symbol of resilience and progress. However, it has descended into a state of political repression and rampant corruption under the rule of President Daniel Ortega and his wife, Vice President Rosario Murillo. Ortega has steadily consolidated his power over the years, silencing opposition voices, cracking down on independent media, and stifling any form of dissent. He has manipulated the electoral system to ensure his continued dominance, leaving little room for fair competition. This consolidation of power has gone hand in hand with a surge in corruption, affecting every level of government. Ortega and his cronies allegedly engage in widespread embezzlement of public funds, diverting resources meant for the public good. The Nicaraguan people have witnessed their hard-won democratic freedoms erode and their economic conditions worsen. As Ortega's regime tightens its grip, the struggle for democracy becomes even more challenging. Despite the overwhelming odds, the spirit of the Nicaraguan people remains unbroken. Their resilience and determination continue to shine through, offering a glimmer of hope for the future. Our journey through the world's most corrupt countries takes us now to Yemen, a nation ravaged by a brutal civil war and a catastrophic humanitarian crisis. The images of war-torn cities, starving children, and destroyed hospitals paint a grim picture of a country in turmoil. For nearly a decade, Yemen has been locked in a conflict that has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and displaced millions more. Families have been torn apart, and entire communities have been uprooted, forced to flee their homes in search of safety and shelter. Both sides of the conflict have been accused of widespread corruption, including embezzlement of public funds, manipulation of aid flows, and war profiteering. This corruption has only served to exacerbate the suffering of the Yemeni people, as resources meant for relief and reconstruction are diverted for personal gain. This systematic looting of Yemen's already meager resources has had a devastating impact on the country's ability to provide basic services to its people. Hospitals, schools, and other essential services have been left in disrepair, unable to function effectively due to the lack of funding and resources. The international community has pledged billions of dollars in aid to Yemen, but much of this aid has been siphoned off by corrupt officials. Instead of reaching those in desperate need, these funds often end up in the pockets of those who perpetuate the conflict. The situation in Yemen is a stark reminder of the devastating human toll of corruption, particularly in conflict zones. The people of Yemen continue to suffer, caught in a vicious cycle of war and greed, with little hope for a brighter future unless significant changes are made. From the ashes of war in Yemen, our journey takes us to the world's youngest nation, South Sudan, a land filled with both promise and peril. Born out of a long and bloody struggle for independence, South Sudan held the promise of a brighter future for its people. The air was filled with hope and dreams of a new beginning, a chance to build a nation from the ground up. However, that promise has been tragically betrayed by rampant corruption, ethnic violence, and a descent into civil war. The dreams of a peaceful and prosperous nation have been shattered by internal strife and power struggles. Despite its vast oil wealth, South Sudan remains one of the poorest countries on earth. The riches beneath its soil have not translated into prosperity for its people, who continue to live in dire poverty. Government officials have engaged in widespread embezzlement of public funds, diverting resources away from essential services and into the pockets of a corrupt elite. This has left the nation without the infrastructure and services needed for development. The situation in South Sudan is a heartbreaking example of how corruption can derail a nation's potential and condemn its people to a life of suffering. The hopes of millions have been dashed, leaving a trail of despair and unfulfilled dreams. Our exploration of corruption takes us now to a nation synonymous with suffering and devastation: Syria. For over a decade, Syria has been ravaged by a brutal civil war that has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and displaced millions more. The Assad regime has been implicated in widespread corruption, enriching its inner circle and cronies through a system of patronage and cronyism. As the conflict escalated, corruption took on a new and even more insidious form: war profiteering. Both the Syrian government and various armed groups have been accused of exploiting the conflict for personal gain. The situation in Syria serves as a stark warning of the corrosive effects of corruption, particularly in times of conflict. From the war-torn streets of Syria, we travel to South America, to a nation once blessed with abundant natural beauty and vast oil reserves: Venezuela. However, this once prosperous nation has experienced a dramatic fall from grace, descending into economic ruin, political turmoil, and social upheaval. The socialist government of Hugo Chavez and his successor, Nicolas Maduro, implemented policies that crippled the private sector, fueled hyperinflation, and created widespread shortages of basic goods. Government officials at all levels engaged in widespread embezzlement, currency manipulation, and smuggling, enriching themselves while the Venezuelan people struggled to survive. The collapse of Venezuela serves as a cautionary tale of how corruption can erode the fabric of society, decimate an economy, and impoverish an entire nation. Our journey through the world's most corrupt countries culminates in Somalia, a nation synonymous with piracy, famine, and state failure. For over 3 decades, Somalia has been ravaged by civil war, clan violence, and the absence of a functioning central government. This prolonged state of anarchy has created a breeding ground for corruption, which has permeated every level of Somali society. Somalia's corruption crisis is not merely a matter of petty bribery or embezzlement, it is a deeply entrenched system that has crippled the nation's ability to rebuild and provide basic services to its people. While the international community has poured billions of dollars into Somalia in the form of aid and peacekeeping operations, corruption has hampered these efforts. We've journeyed to the heart of darkness, witnessed the devastating consequences of unchecked greed and the erosion of hope. But even in these desolate landscapes, a seed of resilience remains. The fight against corruption is a marathon, not a sprint. It requires unwavering courage, persistent pressure, and a belief in the power of collective action. Let us choose hope. Let us choose a world free from the shackles of corruption.